So we all know that the Spanish language is a bit different from one country to the next, and in this video I'm going to show you exactly how it changes with the help of some cool videos and even some internet celebrities. If you're new here, my name is Ollie Richards and this channel is all about helping you learn a new language quickly using the power of story so that you can become fluent faster and live your best life. And did you know that there are at least 10 main varieties of modern Spanish? But it doesn't end there, because Mexican Spanish, for example, has at least 10 varieties of its own. So let's start at the beginning. When the Romans invaded the Iberian Peninsula in 206 BC, I'm sure they had no idea that their language would just drift across the seas into so many parts of the world. Back then, of course, it was just Latin, but now it's French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, all the Romance languages. So Spain is where Spanish was born. That was medieval times though, and modern Spanish is just a little bit different from old Spanish. It picked up a whole bunch of cool words from Arabic for one, and the result is the beautiful language that we have today. Like, for example, the word zumo, meaning fruit juice, is from the Arabic zum. Algodón, meaning cotton, is from the Arabic cotton. Actually, there are lots of words starting with al that are Arabic. Algebra, alcohol, and Arabic. The reason is that al is actually the article in Arabic because it means the. Even the word for crazy, loco, comes from an Arabic word with exactly the same spelling pretty much. One thing that always fascinates people about Spanish is that there are just so many ways to speak it. And if you've traveled much between Europe and the Americas, then you'll know exactly what I mean. It's hardly surprising with over 500 million speakers worldwide. If you really want to get into the deeper mysteries of variety, you'll have to do some adventurous traveling, but we can check out the main ones together. So let's start with Spain. In the 13th century, a Castilian king called Alfonso el Sabio, Alfonso the Wise, standardized the written language, and that's why we call it Castellano or Castilian Spanish. And the monarchs who followed Alfonso made the language official in Spain. Now, Castilian Spanish sounds something a little bit like this.
¿Quieres mejorar tu pronunciación de alemán y tu fluidez al hablar? Bueno, de alemán o del idioma que aprendas. Pues en este vídeo te voy a contar la mejor técnica para lograrlo.
Today, most Spaniards speak Castilian, although in the south they speak another major variety, Andalusian, which is quite different.
El vídeo de hoy me hace muchísima ilusión porque vengo a hablaros del andaluz. ¿Qué es el andaluz? El andaluz es un acento o dialecto que se habla en el sur de España, en Andalucía.
For example, in parts of Andalusia, they lose the so-called Spanish lisp, the th, which is not actually a lisp. And people from some countryside villages have a very strong accent that'd be quite hard to understand. Andalusians also drop the S, the S from a lot of words, so they'll say gracias instead of gracias, which gives their speech a lovely, soft, fluid sound. Here's a clip of my friend Lucy, who is British but learned Spanish deep in the south of Spain.
Y nadie me corrigió y yo pasé 2 años diciendo a todos que tengo una perra chorriza. Y me acuerdo que todos sus amigos siempre me preguntaron: oye Lucy, ¿qué raza de perra tienes? Y yo pensando qué raros son los españoles, ¿no? Qué raros son todo el día preguntándome qué raza de perra tengo. Raza, coño. Coño, una perra choriza, ¿por qué me estáis preguntando todo el día?
And while you're in the south, if you wander into the autonomous region of Murcia, you might hear a unique variety called Murcian or Murciano, one of the toughest varieties out there. One nice thing that they do is they add ico or ica to the end of some words, kind of like how Spaniards say papito when they mean papa. Murcianos would say papico. It just gives a more kind of endearing sound to the word, I guess. Now, in case you weren't sure, there are also a few regional languages in Spain, like Catalan, Galician, and Basque, which are not varieties of Spanish. They are separate languages. I mean, try and understand this.
Bé, jo soc Naona, soc de Mallorca, i per això és molt difícil explicar de on soc. No perquè hagi viscut a moltes bandes, de fet, quasi tota la meva vida, per no dir tota, he viscut a Mallorca.
Not exactly Spanish, is it? But back to the varieties. Here's the quirky kid of Spanish, llanito. Now this is what they speak over in Gibraltar. It's on the southern tip of Spain, but it belongs to Britain actually, and they speak a rather peculiar version of Andalusian Spanish mixed with British English. Yeah, British accent and all. One of the odd things they do in Gibraltar is they take Spanish expressions and they translate them literally into English, which can sound pretty funny. Like the Spanish phrase, for example, no me des la lata. No me des la lata. Its real meaning is to stop nagging me. But Llanitos will say, In English, don't give me the can. Don't give me the literal translation. Don't give me the can. And the easiest way to stop me from giving you the can is to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because then I promise I'll leave you in peace. No more cans. Now, there don't seem to be any rules, and each person has their own way of mixing the languages, and why not? Spain only makes up 10% of the world's Spanish speakers though. So I'm sure you know that Christopher Columbus took Spanish to the Americas, to North, South, Central America and the Caribbean. But did you know it's also the official language of one African country? True story. Let's check it out. The country is Equatorial Guinea, which is this tiny little country just north of the equator, plus these 5 small volcanic islands. The cities have beautiful Spanish colonial architecture, reminiscent of Colombia. Yet in the jungles you can see wildlife like leopards, gorillas, chimpanzees, not to mention amazing clouds of butterflies. They've been speaking Spanish here since colonial times, and their version is like Iberian Spanish but with a slightly different accent and a bit of a French-like sound. No doubt the many indigenous languages have also had some influence. It's not easy finding speakers from Equatorial Guinea, but here's a clip from a local movie.
Hola hermanita, ¿qué tal? ¿Qué haces?
Repasando para la prueba de madurez de mañana. ¿Ya estás preparada? ¿Ya no vas a repasar más?
¿Yo? No, chica. Estoy lista para la batalla. Oye, Rocío y yo hemos quedado para salir esa tarde.
Before we leave Africa, I should mention another former Spanish colony. If you've been brave enough to explore the Western Sahara, which is a crazy hot desert territory some countries are fighting over, you may have heard Spanish there. Although most people there speak Arabic, the Sahrawis speak Spanish. These guys used to be nomadic, but tragically, most of them are living in very harsh refugee camps now. Okay, let's travel down to Asia. No, don't look at me like that. I know it's an unexpected place, but this island nation once spoke Spanish as their official language, and it still lingers in their vocabulary. And I'm talking about the Philippines. Yeah, in fact, the Spanish colonial period in the Philippines lasted a lot longer than a lot of countries in Latin America, including Mexico. And if you've ever heard Filipinos speaking, perhaps you recognize some words, like these ones that you can hear here on the screen, quite reminiscent of Spanish. I'm sure you'll agree. They even have some identical sayings with Spanish, like más o menos, more or less. Filipino or Tagalog doesn't exactly sound Spanish though. If you're in the Philippines and you hear a kind of Spanish, it's more likely to be Chavacano, a Spanish Creole that about 700,000 Filipinos speak. Now interestingly, Chavacano sounds more like Mexican Spanish, with the odd word coming from Native American languages. How on earth? Because in the colonial period, Mexican and Peruvian soldiers were brought here from the Americas. It's a long story, but see how much you can understand.
Hello, hola, buenos días, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo está usted? Hable Chabacano y yo, de Filipinas, mi nana, y Francias, ya mi tata, es Chabacano, crida español, criolla, español, ta conversas en Zamboanga, de el gente zamboangueño.
Let's get into the biggest Spanish-speaking territory now, and one you know all about, which is of course Latin America. On this side of the world, Spanish is usually referred to as Español, and because it was mostly Andalusians who ended up in the Americas, most Latin American Spanish varieties are based on Andalusian Spanish, like the use of ustedes instead of vosotros. But the colonies developed somewhat independently from each other and were influenced by local tribal languages. So it makes sense that Latin American Spanish was shaped in many unique ways. I mean, this is a lot of countries that we're talking about here, right? But by far the biggest variety is Mexican Spanish, and no prizes this time for guessing where that is spoken. Mexican Spanish was most strongly influenced by indigenous languages, but many people say it's the easiest to understand. They speak a little slower, a little clearer perhaps.
Me sigo poniendo nervioso, pero mira, ¿qué le vamos a hacer? Esto es ya cosa del pasado, ya tiene esta mujer haciendo videos bastantes años y yo apoyándola, entonces pues ya quitémonos este nervio, ¿no? ¿Viste? Me trabé, entonces para que vean que el nervio es una cosa real.
Es cosa del pasado, del presente y del futuro. Salud.
Salud, salud.
Gracias por venir.
So maybe that's the one to go for. And if you do, you should check out my book, 101 Conversations in Mexican Spanish, which is packed full of outrageous Mexican slang and a very cool story to boot. Unlike this next variety, which most learners avoid, and it is Caribbean Spanish, spoken on islands like Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic. Now, Caribbean Spanish is known to be one of the most rapidly spoken, and you have to listen carefully because they omit sounds like the D sound at the end of many words. For example, the word mitad, meaning half, because mitad, a kind of very cut open sound at the end. They also tend to drop the S sound at the middle and at the end. They're just basically dropping stuff left, right, and center.
Y bueno, esa es una característica que se ve también en otros acentos del Caribe. Pero en el acento costeño también se ve algo que es como lo más característico, que es algo que nosotros le decimos el golpeado.
But even from island to island, you will hear differences. Apparently, Dominicans are the hardest to understand. They cut huge chunks of a word, like they'll say ta instead of esta. Then there's the peculiar way that the R, the R sounds a little bit French, which is quite cool actually. Arriba, 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 arriba. Anyway, speaking of Spanish islands, Canarian Spanish from the Canary Islands is a variety unique to the Canary Islands, and it's actually where I learned my Spanish. And although they belong to Spain, their language closely resembles the Caribbean varieties that we were just talking about, with tons of Portuguese sounding vocabulary thrown in as well. No surprise there, since Portugal also tried to colonize the islands. There's an awful lot of colonizing going on, wasn't there? They don't use the Spanish lisp, the th either, nor the vosotros form of you. So you should use ustedes there if you are chatting with Canarians. They have loads of their own phrases not heard elsewhere, like very common expressions like mi niño, mi niña. It is a really appealing variety and very close to my heart as well. There are videos of me on this channel speaking Canarian Spanish all over the shop. But let's check out the Highland variety now. Any idea what that might be? Well, I'm talking about Andean Spanish. The Andes Mountains stretch through an amazing 7 countries like Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia. Now, if you know my story, then you'll know that I almost died in my efforts to learn Spanish up in the mountains on the border with Bolivia. Not fun at all, but it was a big turning point in my Spanish, and you can check out this video if you want to hear what that was all about. Have you ever done the Inca Trail? Well, if you have, then you'll know these guys. These are the people of the Andes. The people of the Andes Mountains, they speak with a slower, much slower pace and a really kind of unique rhythm, and the final letters of words are very nice and clear. It's thought of as quite a conservative variety of Spanish and one of the easier ones to understand. In Ecuador, it's common to use cute diminutives like un momentito, por favor. And in Peru, there's lots of overlapping with indigenous languages as well. So think of all these little Peruvian towns on the edge of the jungle. Of course, that means another variety, which is Amazonic Spanish. Is there any end to this? I mean, seriously. Well, we haven't even gotten to the south yet. This is a huge area, and they speak Rio Platense Spanish. Now, the Rio de la Plata runs through parts of Argentina and Uruguay. And they share a pretty special variety of Spanish, one of the most unique. Did you know that more than 60% of Argentines have Italian immigrant blood? And they don't just look a little different, you should hear them speak Spanish. They have a beautiful intonation to their Spanish that sounds like Italian. And I actually spent a lot of time in Argentina myself. And in fact, I remember coming back home after 4 months in Argentina, and I picked up the accent and everything. And my Spanish friends just ripped me to shreds, making fun of me for my accent. Volvió hablando argentino, they used to say. He's come back speaking Argentinian. So one guy, a gringo, my buddy Dustin Luke, who's from the USA, has adopted Argentina as his spiritual home, and he speaks with an incredible Argentine accent. Check it out.
Están cantando, son todos italianos, hablando así, arriba y abajo, y es espectacular. O sea, he escuchado varios acentos en el mundo, pero el acento argentino me llamó atención más. Escuchando como, hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿Todo bien? Eso tiene carácter, tiene personalidad.
One thing that's common here is they use the word chao to mean goodbye. They rarely use the traditional hasta luego. Sounds pretty much like an Italian influence to me. One little country where you could have a really fun immersion experience is Paraguay. There they have 2 official languages, Spanish and Guarani, and most people speak both, so the Spanish here is quite cool. Paraguayan Spanish has unique features because they had a dictator in 1840 who sealed the borders of Paraguay, so they were really isolated, not dissimilar to Japan actually. Nice guy, huh? No surprise, their Spanish absorbed a lot of Guarani, like a phrase they use when things don't look so good, vai vai, which means bad, bad. Then there is Chile. Pretty cool to have a country shaped like this, don't you think? One unique feature of the Chilean variety is that they pronounce ch as sh, which makes Chile get pronounced as Chile. But rumor has it that Chilean Spanish is pretty damn difficult. They have a way of leaving out letters when they speak. So for example, instead of saying de donde eres, meaning where are you from, then you're going to hear something that looks a bit like this. I'm not going to try and say it because I don't speak Chilean Spanish. Take that up as a challenge if you'd like to figure out what's going on there. Now, we can't forget about Central America, of course. This is Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama, Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador. Here, you will hear some S sounds transformed into H sounds, like the word for saint is Santa, right? But you, in this area, this part of the world, you might hear Hanta. It could take a while to figure that out. Quite an interesting change. And Costa Rica has a unique way of pronouncing their R's as well. Actually, this would be kind of tricky to copy, but fun to try. So the R isn't rolled like R in other Spanish-speaking countries. It's kind of a Z sound.
But their double R's and principal R's, which are normally rolled, they actually do a R. And it's almost like a Z or a J, almost like a J, but the tongue, when it starts to roll, it never quite starts the rolling. So instead of going a R, it goes R. And that's how they do with their double R's. Like if they say, for instance, to run, correr, they would say correr, correr, and that R. And a lot of times they go
Quite nice. Huh? But look, to learn Spanish properly, you need some good material. And in this video, I tell you about 7 Spanish books that are great for beginners. There's no need to struggle through Don Quixote or some translation of War and Peace. These are books that you can read and learn from even at a low level. So click this video right now to see what I recommend for you.